Without him, we might not have the Lakers. We may not even have the NBA as it is today. We definitely wouldn't have this court design. The paint would still look like a key. And could you imagine how boring basketball would be without shot clocks? Yeah, thanks, Mikan. Who's George Mikan? The first Mr. Basketball. Mikan was as tall as Dwight Howard and had the frame of a taller LeBron. He was an elite scorer, rebounder, and shot blocker. His natural offensive abilities made him incredibly hard to guard. George Mikan went to the University of DePaul in 1942. It would be future Hall of Famer Ray Meyer's first year of coaching, and he already had a catalyst for domination. Soon he'd bring sellout crowds to Chicago, but before he was ready to win a title, George needed to develop that ability to dominate. Coach Meyer realized how good Mikan could be, and on top of getting in basketball shape, he had Mikan on the speed bag, and even played ping pong. If it had to do with hand-eye coordination, he was doing it. You've probably heard of the Mikan Drill, where you shoot with your left and your right hand, alternating at the basket. That came from Coach Myers, and because of it, Mikan would become deadly with both hands, making him almost unstoppable, with the ability to get his shot off above everyone else. The first big man with a bag, he had a flow about him that most scoring guards have. In his first year with DePaul, Mikan would lead the team to a 19-5 record before they were bounced from the NCAA tournament in the Final Four. All that training had paid off though, as Mikan would make the All-America team that year as a freshman. 2 years later, as a junior, Mikan would take his team to 21-3 and lead the nation in scoring. He willed his team to the NIT title game against St. John's, which in the 40s held the same weight as the NCAA tournament does in March. But DePaul would lose the game, 47-39. But he didn't miss a beat his senior year, leading all scorers for the second year in a row with 23.1 points per game. It'd be his last chance to win a collegiate title game, and after a 19-5 record, they'd get another invite to the NIT. In the first round, DePaul would take on West Virginia and win easily 76-52. Mikan figured out his dominance, dropping 40 points a game this tournament. And in the next round against Rhode Island, he dropped 53, beating the brakes off the Rams. 97-53, they'd earned a second chance to play for a title game, this time facing Bowling Green. And with an undeniable will to win, DePaul came home champions, beating Bowling Green 71-54, finishing out one of the best college careers of all time. But when it came to winning championships, he was just getting started. Mikan would stay in Chicago after winning a title with DePaul, signing with the American Gears of the National Basketball League. It was a 5-year, $60,000 deal, which is about $200,000 a year in today's money, and he justified that contract, helping the Gears to third place in the West with a 26-18 record, which was enough to make it to the World Basketball Tournament, where they'd take on the West's second place Indianapolis Kotskis. Mikan would lead his team to a 3-2 series win over Indy, making it to the second round against the Oshkosh All-Stars. He'd get the broom out and sweep them 2-0. Mikan had led his Gears to the World Basketball Tournament Championship game as a rookie, beating the Rochester Royals 3-1. He made the National Basketball League's first team, and he was MVP of the tournament. There was only one problem. The other owners in the NBL didn't like Maurice White, who owned the Gears. They decided to give the trophy to the team with the best regular season record, the Rochester Royals. Mikan was pissed, and Maurice White argued he should now be president of the NBL, but the owners were not having it. That's when White realized the opportunity to use Mikan to compete with the NBL. He decided to move the Gears to his brand new basketball league, the Professional Basketball League of America. It had 24 teams, the best basketball player in the world, and went out of business in a month, which was a huge problem for the Chicago American Gears. White tried to get back into the NBL, but the owners said no, and the Chicago team was dissolved, which meant Mr. Mikan was a free agent. Just kidding, we didn't have incredibly fun NBA free agent summers back then. What actually happened is the Detroit Gems were the worst team in the NBL in 1946. they won just 4 games that year. They would decide to move to Minneapolis and become the Lakers. But more importantly, they had first pick in the draft of the Gears players. George Mikan later wrote a book calling that Gears team the best he's ever played for. But life goes on, and with the first pick in the 1947 draft of the former Chicago American Gears, the Minneapolis Lakers select George Mikan from the University of DePaul. The beginning of the second most successful basketball franchise in history.
Passes to Mikan in the pivot, and the big center dribbles in and scores.
Jerry West feeds to Chamberlain. Kareem, skyhook, he is.
Here is Kobe exploding to the...
All because the NBL owners didn't like Maurice White. Mikan kicked that success off, winning everything. The scoring title, MVP, the championship. George was balling out of his mind, and he'd win his second championship, averaging 21 points a game. The next year, he'd break his arm. And you can imagine just how debilitating something like that would be. But Mikan was so good, he didn't need that arm, dropping 30 points a game in the playoffs, and winning another title. And you know how big guys can't really shoot free throws? Well, this big man shot 80% from the line in 1949 and 78% for his career. How many 6'10 guys you know could shoot free throws like that, even if they were granny shots? Mikan was dominant beyond belief. Shaq calls him the father of dominance in basketball, which is true, but he definitely had help from the Lakers front office, who surrounded him with a team of Hall of Famers like Vern Mickelson, the first true power forward. Also small forward Jim Pollard. Slater Martin, a short but quick defensive nightmare on the court. Also Bud Grant, who didn't really light up the stat sheet but would later go to the Hall of Fame coaching the Minnesota Vikings. Dude had 3 titles in his first 3 years. No one had touched that level of success in basketball since it had been invented in 1891. And why stop there? 1950, championship. In the 1951 playoffs, Mikan played with a metal plate taped to his broken ankle. He could barely move in the Western Division Finals. And although barely moving means 20 points a game for Mikan, the Lakers lost this series 3-1. The very next year, Mikan dropped 61 in a game against the Rochester Royals, and the Lakers needed every bit of it, winning the game in double overtime. It'd go down as the most points Mikan ever scores in a game. Although George had been through an incredible amount of injuries, he still had some gas left in the tank. In the 53-54 season, Mikan would take his team to a best-in-the-league record of 46-26. Mikan led that team to a Western Conference final victory over the Rochester Royals 2-1, making their 3rd straight finals appearance, this time against the New York Knicks. With Mikan's help, the Lakers were the first team in NBA history to win 3 straight championships, the Lakers' 5th world title. Mikan had become the greatest basketball player of all time, with 6 consecutive scoring titles, 7 championships, though the NBA only recognizes 6 because of the whole Chicago flakeout situation. He was a 2-time league leader in rebounds, although they weren't tracked early in his career, so he very well could have won more. And he also made 6 All-NBA BAA teams. When Mikan turned 31, he had been through so many injuries his body was struggling to keep up, leaving the legendary Lakers and the game that he'd helped build to mainstream popularity. Though he'd left the game, he would be forever enshrined in its history as someone who evolved what it meant to be a big man early in basketball and would help create what we now know to be the greatest sports league in the world, the National Basketball Association. He was the sport's first mainstream superstar in a world where basketball leagues were fighting for people's attention all the time. With Mikan's help, the NBA would not just be established, but cemented as one of the biggest American sports leagues. As the 50s began, lots of people talked about George Mikan's dominance being a problem for basketball. In 1952, they widened the paint to 12 feet instead of 6 feet, so players couldn't stand so close to the rim without being called for 3 seconds. But even that wasn't enough to stop Mikan's dominance, and people wanted to continue changing rules. In March of 1954, coaches scheduled a vote on whether to raise the basket, and the NBA wanted to see how many players would adjust, so they scheduled the Lakers and the Milwaukee Hawks to play one game with 12-foot rims. The NBA also said, while we're experimenting, let's only shoot free throws at the end of each quarter. Just like today, players would foul on an easy shot to make their opponent earn the points at the free throw line. The NBA wanted to keep those fouls from slowing down the game. So if Milwaukee had been fouled enough to earn 10 free throws and Minneapolis earned 6, you'd split the difference and Milwaukee would shoot 4 free throws because they hadn't fouled as much as Minneapolis. The media thought the 12-foot rims wouldn't be too much of a problem for big guys like Mikan. But it'd have an effect as Mikan missed his first 12 shots in the game. The whole team only shot 28%, but they'd end up with the win, 65-63. Lakers power forward Vern Mickelson had a game-high 17 points, but called the experiment a flop because as a rebounder, he had an extra second to find the ball as it came off the rim. Lakers coach Dave McMillan said, no matter what you do, the big man still has the advantage over the small one, which is true to this day, as smaller guys have their advantages. But big guys are often more dominant.
Turned it over 5 times. Shaq again, getting down. Played very well by Bell and forced.
And Mikan was the best example of that domination, as the league introduced goaltending rules as a means to humanize George's invincibility. But it didn't matter. He was just as dominant with the new rules. Maybe one of the most important rule changes in the game Mikan inspired was the invention of the shot clock. The Lakers had a 29-game home winning streak, and the Fort Wayne Pistons were not leaving that building without a W. They kept the ball away from Mikan the entire game by just holding on to it and letting the clock run. Disgusting. But it worked, and in the lowest scoring game in NBA history, Fort Wayne won 19-18. Mikan had 15 of the Lakers' 18 points. And a few years later, the shot clock was added to the game. George Mikan was a legend in every sense of the word. He inspired Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who said, he showed everyone that a true big man could develop the agility and skill needed to play basketball. Mikan quickly opened their minds. Even after Mikan had left the game of basketball, he'd still influenced the game as a commissioner of a league called the American Basketball Association. In 1963, he implemented the three-point shot in the ABA, which would later be adopted by the NBA in 1979. The ABA also used a red, white, and blue ball, which isn't used in games anymore, but you'll see it as the money ball in the NBA's three-point contest to this day. Mikan was inducted into the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame in 1959. He passed away at the age of 79 in 2005, and the Lakers, just last October, retired his jersey. Rest in peace to the ball god of dominance,
Mr. George Mikan, number 99. Welcome to the club. Congratulations.